Hello again. Welcome back to the channel. I hope that you've all been enjoying the World Cup. I know I have been. I was really excited that the United States is going on to the round of 16. This is one of the few times they've actually made it past the group stage, which is exciting for me. And yes, I'm a bit of an oddball when it comes to sports. I don't really like most American sports. I like soccer. What is called football in the rest of the world, and what we call soccer here in the United States. I prefer to watch soccer rather than American football. And I'm going to keep calling it soccer rather than football just because I'm actually going to be talking about football today, American football anyway, and I don't want to botch the terms. Anyway, I know the rules of American football. I grew up watching it with my dad. I grew up as it is incorporated in schools as a school sport, and it is very much part of American culture and American life. So I know about it. I'm just not all that big into it. I'd much rather watch the World Cup games than I would watch the Super Bowl or any of that. Anyway, so I wanted to talk about American football because, it's something that's relatively unique to the United States, and the rest of the world. When we talk about football, they're like, well, you mean running and kicking a round ball? And we're like, no, what are you talking about? So I know that there's confusion about American football and football from the rest of the world. And I know that there's a meme going around on the internet that calls American football, instead of football, they call it should be hand egg, because you hold it in your hands and it's more egg shaped. So it's hand egg rather than football. Anyway, let's talk about football. So like I said, I grew up watching football. I know the rules. I know I'm not hugely interested in football, so I don't know the stats. I don't know a lot of the players. The teams, more or less, I can get by. Anyway, why is it called football? Well, it was the name that was officially chosen for the sport back in 1876. At that point in time, what we were playing possibly looked a lot more like soccer, and we used soccer style rules. We switched from the soccer style rules to rugby style rules, and so they, at that point in time, decided to distinguish the sport from what we called soccer, and because of that, they called it football. You can also call it gridiron. That's another term that we use to distinguish football, American football, from any other sport. And it was actually almost called rugby. They almost decided to go with rugby since they were using rugby style rules. So there you go. It was almost American rugby as opposed to rugby, rather than soccer and or football and American football. We almost had to call it American rugby, which probably would have made more sense, if I'm being honest, since we were using rugby style rules. But I guess that was also, well, we already have rugby, let's not make more confusion. So they called it football. Anyway, the game will last 30 minutes. Now, or 30 minutes, there are two 30-minute halves. It is a 60-minute game. Now, if you're familiar with soccer and things, it's two 45-minute halves, and the game ends up going much longer than that. It's similar with American football. If you're watching it on television, you'll probably be sitting in front of the television for 2 hours to watch a game that only should last an hour. But it's broken down into two 30-minute halves and 4 15-minute quarters. So the game starts with a kickoff. They flip the coin, much like soccer, and one side elects to kick, and the other side elects to receive. There is some strategy to that. A lot of teams, if they win the coin toss, they will elect to kick off so that they're receiving the ball in the second half. Sometimes they won't. Sometimes they will elect to receive. It just depends. The field is 100 yards long. A yard is not quite a meter. If I remember it's about, so a yard is about 38 inches, and a yard is 36 inches. So it's a little under 100 meters in length. And you have the field is separated into 50 and two sections of 50. And each section is then separated into 10-yard sections. And you have the end zones on either end. Now, the end zones are where you score, where you try to get the ball so that you can score points. There are a couple more ways to do it. Now, you have two teams, obviously, and there are 11 players on the field for each team, so a total of 22 players. You get 4 tries to move the ball 10 yards. If you're successful and you move the ball 10 yards, then you get another 4 more tries. On a failure, you have to turn over the ball to the other team. You can move the ball by either passing or running. And they do have running plays, and we'll get to the players and stuff and how that works in just a sec. All right, here we go. So how do you win a game of football? You get the most points, obviously. And the points are different based on what kind of point you get. So you get 6 points for a touchdown. Now, a lot of times, most people will say you get 7 points for a touchdown. That's not exactly true. You get 6 points for a touchdown. And a touchdown is when you get the ball into the end zone. You get 3 points for a field goal, and that's when you kick the ball through the uprights. Now, there's some upright poles at the back of the end zone. And if you kick the ball through those uprights, you'll get 3 points. A lot of times what will happen is in a football game is you will try for your touchdown. If you can't get close enough to get the ball into the end zone, and you're on your 4th try, you don't think you're going to be able to get it. A try is called a down. So you're on 4th down. You just don't think you're going to be able to get a first down. So you have to get that ball. You have to move it 10 yards in 4 downs. You're on the 4th down. You just don't think you can get it, but you're close enough to get a field goal. You'll likely try for a field goal, and then the other team gets the ball at that point. There's also 2 points for what's called a safety. If you tackle your opponent, and your opponent has the ball, and the only person who can be tackled is the person with the ball. You can't just willy-nilly throw people to the ground. You can't just willy-nilly grab people and trip them up. They have to have the ball. Now, so if they have the ball and you tackle them in the end zone, in their own end zone, you get 2 points, and the ball actually is given to you. So it's a turnover for your team, plus you get 2 points. Then they have 2 more points after touchdown. So if you've ever watched American football and you've seen a team score a touchdown, they line up again and they get another attempt to make more points. Most of the time, the team who has scored the touchdown will opt for the kick. The kick is almost always a guaranteed point. Almost always. Very rarely do the kicks get blocked. Very rarely does the other team manage to get around the defenders and get to the kicker and block the ball. And so because of that, most teams will actually go for the single point rather than the 2 point. There is a 2 point conversion, and usually what happens is if you're tied and the game is just about to end, you might try for a 2-point conversion. Or if you're behind and you're trying to force an overtime, if you're behind by 1 point, or what I should say is you're behind by 2 points. So if you scored a touchdown and 2 points would tie, then you might try for that 2 points and force the game into overtime. In order to get the 2 points, what you have to do is you have to get the ball again into the end zone. It's just like a touchdown. You either throw the ball to a receiver, you give the ball to a running back, and they have to get it over the goal line, basically into the end zone. If they do that, you only have one chance. You only have one chance to do it. If you manage it, then you get 2 points. So that's the breakdown, and that's why most of the time people will say that a touchdown is worth 7 points, because most teams will just do that point after the kick, and they'll only get the 1 point. So that's the breakdown. Whichever team again has the most points at the end will win the game, and very rarely, unlike soccer, so you'll have a heated game between two teams, and sometimes, depending on like if it's a final or something like that, the game will go into overtime. It may go into a shootout, but very rarely is that something that happens with very rarely is that something that happens with soccer. In American football, on the other hand, they almost never end with a tie game. Now, they do track that statistic. They have a win, tie, loss statistic that they will track. But for the most part, they will force games into overtime, double overtime, sudden death overtime, whatever it happens to be, so that and with sudden death, it's whichever team happens to score. So if you have an overtime, and at the end of that overtime both teams are still tied, you have another overtime that's usually double overtime. The two teams are still tied, then they'll go into sudden death, and whichever team scores first, they're declared the winners. And so that's the breakdown for the scores. And let's see. Okay, so on the teams that are playing on the teams, they have they'll sometimes be called unit instead of team, because calling it an offensive team or defensive team, you've already got the teams on the teams are playing the game, but they have an offensive, a defensive, and a special teams. Now each team consists of different players. That's why American football teams are so large. You have offensive players and defensive players, and they don't usually cross. You don't usually have an offensive player that's on the defensive team. Sometimes you will have the quarterback, and we'll talk about the quarterback in just a minute. Sometimes the quarterback who is basically, the quarterback is basically the team captain, basically in charge of the offensive team. Sometimes the quarterback will be on the special teams, and we'll talk about the quarterback in just a minute. But you have these three teams. The offensive team, they try to make points. Defensive team, they try to keep the other team from making points. And then you have the special teams. The special teams come in when there's a kicking situation. And we'll talk about that again in just a minute. So on the offensive team, you have the quarterback. The quarterback is the one who's in charge of the ball. Now, the quarterback, once again, if you've seen American football, they have the two teams line up. What happens next is called the snap. So, and that's when the center, which is basically the center of the offensive line, the center snaps the ball to the quarterback. It's also called a hike. So the center will hike the ball to the quarterback. So the quarterback is the one that then has the ball. They're the ones that call the plays, decide whether it's a running play or a passing play. Very rarely does the quarterback actually run with the ball themselves, or usually they will try to give the ball to somebody else. You have the running backs. You have a halfback and a full or tailback. You also have a fullback, and they're the ones that if you're going to run the ball, you give it to them. Then you have your receivers. You have your wide receivers and your tight ends. Wide receivers, they go out further and they cover a longer distance. And then you have your offensive line. As I said, you have the center. You have guards on either side of the center, and then tackles. If I remember right, the tackles are on the end. Hold up. Let me check on that. Yep, just did a quick check, and yes, the tackles are on the outside of the guards. Now, the fullback is sometimes there to run interference for the halfback or the tailback, also called a running back. So the quarterback will give the ball to the halfback, tailback, and then the fullbacks, who are larger, beefier gentlemen, will try to keep the other positions from the defensive team from interfering with the run. But they can also be used as running backs. That's what they're there for. The thing is that a lot of these positions are somewhat fluid. Usually the quarterback won't try to give the ball to someone on the offensive line. That's not what they're there for. They're there to screen the quarterback, to keep the quarterback protected, and to maybe open up a hole in the defensive line so that a running back can get through. But with the running backs, the halfback and the fullback, they kind of are fluid. So if the quarterback can't get the ball to the right running back, he may choose a different running back to get the ball to, and that may include a toss. The receivers, on the other hand, that's what they're there for. They go out to receive the ball, and no matter what play the team decides to run, all of the other players, whoever doesn't have the ball, isn't designated to get the ball, they will run like they're going to get the ball. They're going to play like they're going to get the ball because it's part of fooling the defense into letting you get away with your play. All right. Let's move on to the defensive team. So the defensive team, we have the defensive line, and we have the defensive ends, defensive tackles. Their job is to stop any plays that the offense is trying to run. Now, the defensive line, as you see here with those red X's, you have the defensive ends on the ends, defensive tackles in the middle. Their job is to do exactly that. You have the linebackers, you have the middle and the outside linebackers. They're there to stop anybody from who may get past the defensive line. They're there to stop them. And then you have further back, you have the safeties, and one is FS, which is a free safety, and then the other, I forget what the SS means. It's something safety. They're there to keep track of the receivers. So if they're maybe running a passing play, the receivers are going to go towards the back to make more distance, to try to get more yardage. And so you'll have those safeties that are there. But you also have cornerbacks. Now, they're there on the ends, and they may go after a receiver or a runner. They're there to kind of pull a flanking move if they can and try to get around to get the quarterback. Now, one of the things that happens sometimes is the offensive line can't hold the defense back, and the quarterback will get sacked. Sacked means that the quarterback is tackled behind what we call the line of scrimmage. Now, that dotted line on the screen there, that's the line of scrimmage. That's where the ball was placed. And if the quarterback is tackled behind that line, it's called a sack, and the team loses yardage, because the ball is usually moved from the line of scrimmage back to wherever the quarterback is. and then the quarterback may even back up a few more steps to try to see downfield farther, get a better look over the heads of the defense. And so because of that, you really don't want your quarterback to be sacked. It's a bad thing. Okay, let's see. Defensive team. We talked about the defensive teams. Now we're going to talk about the special teams. Now, special teams, they're responsible for field goals and point after attempts. You have a place kicker, a holder, and a long snapper. Now, the long snapper, the job of them is to get the ball to whoever's going to be holding it for the place kicker. And usually when you're making one of these field goal attempts, you don't want to be too close to your offensive line, because if you're too close, you end up kicking the ball into the back of them. You want to have that room. So they'll stand back quite a ways. And so it also gives the runner or the place kicker enough time to run up and kick the ball, generating some power with that run up. Now, this right here, this picture, this is a kickoff, not a field goal, because you have the defensive line there is going to be trying to stop the offense, and the place kicker is up here to kick it off. The only difference between I shouldn't say the only difference. When you have a kickoff situation, you won't have a holder, you won't have a long snapper. You'll just have the place kicker and the defenders, because you'll have the ball will be supported by a tee. Then you have punts. Now, punts are turnovers. What happens is if you're trying to move the ball down the field, you've taken your 4 downs, you couldn't move it. It's actually 3 downs. You've taken 3 downs. You're on your 4th down, and you can't move the ball down the field far enough to get your next set of 4 downs. You may opt to punt. Usually a punt is you're on your own side of the field. You're not past the 50-yard line, and you don't want the ball to be turned over to the other team, because that puts them at an advantageous situation to make a point. So you'll try to do a punt and kick the ball further down the field. Now with the punter, with the punt, you also won't have a holder. You'll have a long snapper, but you won't have a holder, because whoever's punting the ball, they will catch the ball themselves and hold it out to their desired length and then kick it from there. So you have the punter, much like the place kicker, an up back. Let's see. I was looking at this earlier. The thing is that when I look at it on screen, so an up back is on the defensive team. They're on the ones that are kicking the ball away. So at that point, they're the defensive team. They stand behind the punter, and they then rush forward. Then you have the gunner, who they run down the sidelines to try to get to the punt returner and tackle them. So they're usually pretty quick, usually pretty fast players. And then you have the punt returner. Now the punt returner is very much like the kickoff returner. So if you have a turnover situation like that, you have these positions that take care of it. All right, so some football terminology. We've talked a little bit about this. The line of scrimmage, that's the line where the ball is placed down on the field. And that's the line you're trying to get past to make more yardage. So if you're on first down, that means you have 10 yards to go before either you get another first down, or you have to turn over the ball. And so the line of scrimmage is basically 10 yards back from where you need to be. And then you have a neutral zone. Now, the neutral zone is kind of stupid in American football. I don't know why they even have it. It's the length of the ball placed on the field. So it's like 12 inches long, maybe, and it goes all the way across the field. It's dumb. The only person who's allowed in the neutral zone is the center. If either team goes into that neutral zone before the ball is snapped to the quarterback, they get a foul. So it's very much like the offsides rule in soccer, where the attacking team can't go into the goal box unless there's a defender between them and either the ball has to be there first or a defender has to be there between them and the goalie. So it's very much like that, but it can be called on either side. So if the defensive team jumps the gun and goes rushing in first before the ball is moved, that's offsides on them. If the offensive team goes into that again before the center has the chance to snap the ball to the quarterback, then it's offsides on the offensive team, and either one can lose yardage that way. Now, forward pass, this is the typical pass that you will have in football. You can only make one forward pass per play. So if you're the quarterback, the ball gets snapped to you, you take the ball, you rush back a ways, and you lob it down the field towards your opponent's end zone. So in the direction you are going to make a point. Then that's your forward pass, and you cannot pass the ball forward in that manner again. If you do, then it's a foul, and there are penalties for that. So basically, I've written on here incomplete, and the reason that I've written this as incomplete is if the quarterback throws the ball down the field and the receiver can't catch it, it's an incomplete pass, the play is stopped, and you go to your next down. And you go back to the line of scrimmage, so you go back to where the ball was placed initially, and you basically start over from there, but you're now one play down. So you have one, if you were on first down, it's now second down, and you haven't made any progress with the ball. An incomplete pass cannot be stolen by the other team and have a turnover at that point. If the receiver catches the ball, and then drops it, then that's not an incomplete pass. That's a fumble. And we'll get to that in a minute. So a lateral pass, this is more like what you see in rugby. Now, a lateral pass is defined as any pass that goes either sideways or backwards from the passer. So if I'm running down the field, I see a guy in front of me, he's going to tackle me, I can turn and throw the ball behind me to somebody else. I can turn and throw the ball to somebody to the side of me. I cannot throw it ahead of me. That's not a lateral pass. And remember, we only get one forward pass. Now, there is kind of a caveat to that, because if you are still behind the line of scrimmage and the quarterback has not made a throw, so you're a running back, the quarterback hands the ball to you, you start running, you're still behind the line of scrimmage, and you're not going to be able to do anything at that point, you can actually throw the ball. You can throw the ball in a forward pass because you're behind the line of scrimmage and you still haven't taken your one forward pass for the game, for that play, for that down. But if you're beyond the line of scrimmage, you can only do a lateral pass, either straight out to your side or behind you. And the thing is that while you see this a lot in rugby, I mean, rugby is built on this kind of lateral pass, you won't see it very often in American football. They abide by, they have a rugby style play and rules, but you don't see a lot of lateral passing. I have seen a couple of very, very excellently executed plays where the play was a series of these lateral passes. Every time the runner got in trouble, chucked the ball behind him, and the next runner made more yards. They made a touchdown that way. It was an amazing play, but you rarely see them doing these lateral passes, because a lateral pass, unlike a forward pass, if you drop it, it's a fumble. Whereas a forward pass, if you catch it and then drop it, it's a fumble. If with a lateral pass, even if it like bounces off the back of your, you're not paying attention, the ball hits you in the helmet and bounces off, that's a fumble. If it's a lateral pass, if you're running down the field, you're not quite to your designated position yet, but the quarterback is forced to throw the ball and hits you in the back of the head. If it was a forward pass, that's an incomplete, and you still retain possession of the ball. So most teams don't practice lateral passes that much. They don't use them just because of the chance that they could turn the ball over. Now, we call that a fumble. A fumble happens when you have control of the ball. You have to have control of the ball. It can't be like the ball's coming in, it hits your hand, and you bobble it in the air, and then it falls. That's not a fumble, unless it's a lateral pass. So if the ball comes and it hits your hand, but you can't quite retain control of it, and it falls on the ground, that's an incomplete. But if you pull it in and you've got it here, and like a defender hits your arm and bumps the ball out, that's a fumble. If you're running along, you have the ball tucked under your arm, and the player hits your arm and the ball comes flying out, that's a fumble. And you'll see big pileups of players when there's a fumble, because they're trying to get possession of the ball at that point, either for your team or for your opponent's team. Anyway, if you have questions about football, I'll do my best to answer them. Once again, I've known about a lot of this stuff. I haven't categorized it in my head because I grew up watching football, playing it with my friends, but I don't really care for football. I'd much rather watch soccer, but I'm American. I know how it works. So if you'd like to hit me up in the comments, go ahead. And I know this was a bit longer than my others, but there's a lot more to unpack here. I think I'll talk about basketball and baseball obviously some other time, because I'm wrapping it up right now. But if you have any questions, let me know. Like and subscribe, and have fun.